Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to be going through every single NHL team and picking one free agent that they will sign this offseason. Now this offseason is setting up to be absolutely amazing with the NHL expansion draft, with the actual NHL draft, but the free agent crop this year is going to be spectacular, and there's going to be a lot of options for every single NHL team this offseason. But who do I see your favorite NHL team signing this offseason, and where do I see the big free agents landing in 2021? Watch till the end for all of the free agency predictions and all the picks, and hit that subscribe button if you're new. 60% of the people watching are not subscribed, and we make daily hockey content here, so if you're wanting to know all about free agency, all about the NHL offseason, this channel is the place to be. Now, once again, we're going to go through every single NHL team and pick who they will sign in free agency. And when it comes to the order for today's video, it's not going to be alphabetical. We're going to go through the playoffs mixed with the regular season standings. And that means that we're going to start with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the one player that they will sign this offseason, which honestly might be the only guy they're able to sign in free agency. And this is a guy that I think makes a lot of sense for them. They'll lose quite a bit of guys, not just in the offseason due to trades and free agency, but also due to the expansion draft. Tampa will have some casualties, and of course there will probably be some LTR involved, but I do think for Tampa they'll be in search of a backup goaltender. Curtis McElhinney will probably retire, and even then if he stayed, he's just not good enough, but I do think a guy that could fit that role is James Reimer. Maybe a $1 million deal for 1 year to come on a team, maybe going for a back-to-back. I think that's pretty enticing for a guy that hasn't gone too far in the Stanley Cup playoffs as of recently, but he was pretty good last year, age 33, played 22 games, got a .906 save percentage, and could be a very serviceable guy on a Tampa team that could use that added goaltender boost behind Vasilevsky. Now going on to the next team, the team right behind Tampa in the actual standings overall, the Montreal Canadiens, who lost in the Stanley Cup final. I think Montreal will be a super interesting team this offseason. I think they will end up re-signing Phil Deneau, and that'll be a huge #1 priority for them. But I think what comes after will also be interesting. I think they will try to go for some score out there, and I think the most logical one goes with Mike Hoffman. To me, Mike Hoffman makes a lot of sense for Montreal as almost a pure power play, great overall shooter that they can just desperately use throughout not just the playoffs, but the regular season especially. And obviously when you're losing Tatar, I think adding another winger could definitely help him. I think a $4.2 million contract for 2 years, not really too big of a contract, but still enough where Hoffman probably gets what he wants. He goes to a team like Montreal, gets a big opportunity on the power play, and could work with some great playmakers like Nick Suzuki. Honestly, a win-win in my opinion. And last year with the St. Louis Blues, got 36 points in 52 games played. Now when it comes to the next team, I next up have the Vegas Golden Knights, and one free agent that I think they will sign this offseason will be actually Minnesota Wild centerman Nick Bonino. I think Vegas is going to definitely want to target that center position. They might get Jack Eichel, but I think in free agency they'll also get Nick Bonino, who I think in terms of a third line center spot could definitely work there. If they're going to give up William Karlsson in the Jack Eichel trade, that'll definitely hurt their center depth, and Nick Bonino I think brings a lot of intangibles and a lot of good values that Vegas doesn't really have right now. He was amazing in faceoffs, decent defensively. I don't think had the greatest year in terms of consistency. He is on the older side of things too as well, but he's 33, obviously won those cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and last year got 26 points in 55 games played. As a third line center, he's not a bad option, and I think Vegas will want to pick him up. Then we now go on to the New York Islanders, the last Final Four team, and this will be a pretty low budget one. Islanders don't have much cap space. They're with their RFAs in total, they'll have a lot of guys to sign in Sorokin, Bavillier, and Pelech, and I think that leaves just a little bit of cap space. I think they'll sign Travis Boyd to a $950K contract, maybe to fulfill that fourth line center spot with Sasik is probably leaving, but I think that's about it. But now we're going to go to another team that disappointed in this year's playoffs, in the Colorado Avalanche, and a player that I think they will sign in free agency. I think they're going to go for an older veteran presence that can bring some stability defensively on that blue line, and I think they will go for old veteran D-man Nicholas Hjalmarsson. Now I'm saying he's old, I'm saying he's veteran, but he still can play defensively, and even though last year there was no offense to be seen, defensively, which is where he makes his money, he was still very, very good and well above average. But there is still some concerns. I think they will sign him for $2 million, a 2-year deal. He's 34 years old, though, got 5 points in 41 games played last year. But again, the defense is what you're paying Hjalmarsson for, and the experience as well, especially with that Colorado blue line, especially with Erik Johnson potentially being out, lacking some of that. But now we're going to move on to the Carolina Hurricanes. I think they'll make a pretty big free agent signing this year, and with the likely loss of Dougie Hamilton in free agency, they'll still have some cap space, and I think they will use it for new Stanley Cup champion David Savard. I think the Canadiens will make a huge splash here, and I think they will sign Savard for a $6.5 million contract for 3 years. Not a huge long-term investment for Carolina or Savard, but a pretty big cap hit, and I think Carolina can afford to have that cap hit for these next couple of seasons. After that, it starts to get triggered with guys like Sebastian Aho coming out of their deals, but he was just coming off a Stanley Cup in Tampa, was fantastic there. Carolina could use some more steadiness and some more reliability on that blue line, especially with Dougie Hamilton gone. Slavin could be a great second pair option. But now we're going to move on to the Florida Panthers. I think they'll sign the man, the myth, the legend, and come back to his original team. I think the Florida Panthers will sign Erik Goodbranson. I'm not sure what the contract will be, but I think this is just too funny. For me, Florida doesn't really have a ton of flexibility this year. Maybe they go after a guy like Tomas Tatar potentially, but I don't think there's going to be any big splashes outside of a guy like that. Now, speaking of big splashes, we're now going to move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the one guy that they will sign in free agency this year, definitely the biggest guy out there, that will be two-time Stanley Cup champion Luke Schenn. I see it being pretty close to a normal deal, maybe like a $900K 1-year deal, but hey, 2 Stanley Cups for Luke Schenn. I think Pittsburgh will want to bring some leadership and some veteranness there, and that's about it. I don't think Pittsburgh can really afford to do too much else. But now we're going to move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they will actually have some interesting flexibility, especially if Seattle ends up taking Alexander Kerfoot. They'll have a need at that third line center spot. I think there's a perfect addition for them in free agency, and that is Casey Cizikas. They likely won't be, or New York likely won't be able to re-sign him in free agency, and I do think Toronto could have a really strong need there, but I think Cizikas checks all the boxes. He is a hometown kid, but in terms of the play style, he's rugged, defensive, great face-off ability, great leadership there, great consistency, really just a model, or a role model for the rest of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think he'd be a great addition there, and he's not too old either, currently at the moment at age 30, and I think he would be perfect for the Leafs. I mean, the contract will be a $3.5 million deal for 2 years to hopefully for Cizikas bring the cup to his hometown team. But now we're going to move on to the Washington Capitals, and this is actually a very interesting one. I think Washington will once again target a center, whether that's Dano or Alexander Wenberg. I think Dano will likely re-sign, which I think leaves the Capitals with Alexander Wenberg to sign this offseason. With Kuznetsov likely being gone, that will freeze a lot of cap space for them, but I think Wenberg will get a $5.5 million deal for the next 3 seasons, but Wenberg was absolutely spectacular for the Panthers this past year. Really underrated, really consistent, and in his season last year, he got 29 points in 56 games played. He's 26 years old, still super young, and I think Washington will want to bring that kind of consistent presence onto that middle six. But now we're going to move on to the Minnesota Wild, a team that I think could definitely use a boost in terms of the center position. Now, you already have Nick Bonino leaving, but I think they'll replace him somewhat with Paul Stastny. I think Stastny's going to get a pretty interesting contract at $4 million for 2 seasons, but this last year, Winnipeg was still the status quo. Even though he is 35 years old, it might be kind of a replica of the Eric Staal situation. I don't think that's too bad for Minnesota. This last year, though, got 29 points in 56 games played. Not too bad. I think Minnesota will want to add that type of presence onto the team. Now we're going to move on to another big team here, I think in free agency, that's going to make a big splash. We're now going to move on to the Boston Bruins. And to me, the more I think about the fits, the more I just love it. I think the Boston Bruins will end up signing Alec Martinez. If Vegas can't get it done, I think Boston is going to swoop in and get Martinez's services, and I think it would be a perfect fit alongside Charlie McAvoy and alongside those younger defensemen there. Martinez obviously has the cup wins, he has the experience, but isn't at the place right now like a Duncan Keith where he can't play. He had a great season for Vegas, was great in the playoffs, and I still think has a lot of service to give. I think he'll make $7 million for 2 years and be a rock on that blue line for the next couple of seasons. But now, unfortunately, we have to move on to the Duncan Keith team and the Edmonton Oilers, and honestly, with $11 million left to re-sign Yamamoto, Larson, Smith, Cahoon, I don't know who they sign. Mark Pysyk to like $900K. Good luck, Kenny. That's all I have to say. Anyways, let's move on to the Nashville Predators, a team that actually has cap space to work with. I know, it's a crazy thought. Now going on to Nashville, I don't even know if they'll use that cap space to their advantage too much in terms of the actual signings. I think they'll go for a veteran goaltender with the kind of a retirement hole that Pekka Rinne has left in that organization. I do think they will end up re-signing Devan Dubnyk, a 1-year, $1 million deal. Not too much of an investment. I don't think they're expecting him to be too good. He would help the tank. He would help nurture a guy like UC Saros, and I think it would help both sides involved. Now we're going to move on to the Winnipeg Jets, and I think they will actually end up signing Tomas Tatar. This was a fit that I had a couple days ago in one of my other videos where I had him going for $7 million. I'm going to lessen that to $6 million, but I still think it will be a 1-year deal where Tomas Tatar goes to the Jets. They have some cap space at this current moment too, but he goes to the Jets, works on that power play, is a great playmaker and potentially a decent shooter to some of those amazing players like Scheifele and obviously Ehlers and I mean, I could just list the entire top 6. Dubois, Connor, Wheeler. There's a lot of guys to work with there. And I think Tatar could definitely fit right at home. A kind of a try-me deal to see how he works out. I think in Winnipeg, he'd do a lot better than he would do in Montreal this past season, at least when it comes to the ending. Let's hope. But now we're going to move on to the St. Louis Blues, a team that will be definitely interesting. I think most of their big moves will come via trades, obviously, with guys like Vladimir Tarasenko and potentially Vince Dunn being on the move. But with them probably re-signing James Schwartz, it doesn't leave them with too much cap room, but I do think they'll go for a more sturdy, reliable D-man. I think that will be veteran guy Ian Cole. Now, Ian Cole has, I still think, value in the NHL. I think Colorado was kind of missing his calm presence on the blue line this past year, especially when it mattered most. But I think when it comes to Ian Cole, he'll get a $2 million deal for 2 seasons. He's still 32 years old, had 8 points in 54 games played this last year. Not a bad player whatsoever, not amazing, but pretty much average, but you're paying him for those intangibles, and I think St. Louis could definitely use that with still some younger guys in that blue line. Now we're going to move on, though, to the next team and move on to the New York Rangers, a team that I think has a lot of options. I doubt Casey Cizikas goes from the Islanders to the Rangers. I think that would be a little bit sacrilegious, so I'm going to say they go for a different third-line center option, and I think it will be actually former Leaf and former Blue Tyler Bozak. Now, Tyler Bozak, I don't think he's going to sign a big deal by any means. It'll be $4 million for 1 year, but he'll serve as that third-line center. And even though he is 35 years old, he provides some flexibility, I think, for the Rangers that is badly needed, especially if they go after a guy like Jack Eichel, and let's say Ryan Strome is in that deal. You can have a top 3 center core of Eichel, Zibanejad, and Tyler Bozak, which I don't think is too bad. And Bozak was pretty good for the Blues this past year, and when it comes to his stats, he had 17 points in 31 games played for just kind of all-right St. Louis team. I think Bozak still has value, and as a third-line face-off center, there's a lot worse bets you can make. But now we're going to move on to my favorite team, the Dallas Stars, and go on to the one player that they will sign this free agency. I'm going to move on to my boy, Blake Coleman. Now, I know I've said in the past that Tampa is going to re-sign Blake Coleman. At this point, unless they get rid of Tyler Johnson and Killorn, it doesn't seem too likely, and I don't see them actually giving up both of those guys either, which leaves Blake Coleman, I think, is the biggest casualty that Tampa will have to face this offseason. But I think Dallas is going to pay him handsomely as a hometown kid when going off 2 back-to-back Stanley Cups. But I think he's definitely going to get paid this offseason, that is for sure. I think he'll get $5.5 million for 4 years by Dallas, probably being an overpay, but I think he will get overpaid this offseason, and Tampa likely won't be the team to actually be able to do that. Dallas does have some more flexibility, and I think they look at these next couple of years really as the big pushes. Coleman could be that next extra piece, and if healthy, they could certainly make the playoffs next season, where Coleman has obviously proved himself quite well. But now we're going to move on to the Philadelphia Flyers, and my big addition for them, they're going to want to solve this defense. It might come in the trade route with maybe Seth Jones, but I think one guy they would definitely be a positive to add this free agency would be former Dallas Star, potentially Jamie Oleksiak. Honestly, for me at least, is the most underrated physical defensive defenseman in the NHL, has great size but plays like it too. He's a scary guy to go up against and try to do anything up against the opposing blue line. It's just impossible sometimes, but Oleksiak is great defensively. Philadelphia allowed the most goals this past season in the entire NHL, and I think rebounding that defense will be a big priority for Philly, and Jamie Oleksiak will do some amazing things there, I think. Now we're going to move on to the Calgary Flames, though. This will be a team that I think will acquire the services of a great top 6 rugged winger, a guy that will probably get overpaid this offseason, but I think this team in Calgary will be the team to do it. I think they will sign from Toronto, Zach Hyman. I think Zach Hyman is just, there's no chance he's a Leaf, and with Edmonton's cap space being the way it is, I don't see Edmonton being able to sign him either. I think Calgary is a very interesting spot for him. They're kind of lacking some identity here. They kind of have left Matthew Tkachuk to defend for himself, and with Zach Hyman going onto that team, it's not like they need more ruggedness, but it's always nice to have, and I think for Zach Hyman, it's a pretty solid spot for him. I think especially that fit of Elias Lindholm with Zach Hyman could certainly work. I think him alongside a guy like Johnny Gaudreau would also be pretty great. But you could have a different line of Matthew Tkachuk and then a different line of Zach Hyman, and you could bring some ruggedness into both of your top 6 lines. I think Calgary will want to do that, even if it is for a pretty big deal. I see him getting $4.8 million for 6 years, but I do see Calgary being a team that will give that long-term contract up. When it comes to the Chicago Blackhawks next up, I think they'll also be another team like Philly that'll want to rebound that defense. They got rid of the Duncan Keith contract. They'll probably end up bringing Seth Jones via trade, but one guy I do see them getting back, and a guy that I don't see the Oilers being able to re-sign, is defenseman Adam Larson. I think they'll get a $4 million deal for 2 seasons, and Larson was just okay this year, nothing special, nothing terrible, but he still has some value and still in a full-time role can provide some defensive play. I think Chicago want to get another big addition there, literally a big addition, and add to that decor. I think that's pretty much the most safe route they can go in, and it's a shorter term deal, which I think makes sense for both parties involved too. Now we're going to move on to the Arizona Coyotes, and I do see them going for a decent fish. I do see them going for John Merrill of the Montreal Canadiens. I do see it being a pretty long-term, middle-of-the-pack deal. $3 million for 3 years. I mean, Arizona has to pay somebody. I think John Merrill will be one of those guys, and with especially guys like Demers and Goligoski likely being gone, I think Merrill can fill some of those defensive roles that have been missed this past couple of years. Now we're going to move on to the Ottawa Senators, though. This is a player that probably should be re-signed by Toronto, but I just have a feeling they're not going to be able to get it done. I think the Ottawa Senators will end up getting Zach Bogosian. Now, Ottawa doesn't have any players right now that are over 30 or 30 years old on that defense. I think that's definitely a need for them this offseason to bring some veteranness there, and I think Zach Bogosian does fill that role. When it comes to this past season, he was actually pretty decent in a pretty much full-time role for the Leafs. Wasn't really, again, spectacular, but played the way that he needed to play to get wins and to get defensive results, and he was pretty good in that department. I think in Ottawa, there's potential there, and playing with guys like a Brandstrom or a guy like a Thomas Chabot wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them. Now we're going to move on to the Vancouver Canucks, and there's another team that is in need of a center, a third-line center. I think they will go for Detroit Red Wings UFA Luke Glendening. Now, it might be another overpay for a bottom sixer, but Luke Glendening does have actual supreme value. In terms of the face-offs, in terms of the defensive play, Luke Glendening still can bring that. I think it'll be a $3 million deal for 2 years, not this super long-term commitment like Roussel or Jay Beagle was, but I think Luke Glendening will basically be what Jay Beagle was supposed to be, and Jay Beagle will likely be the fourth-line center. Glendening will likely be the third-line center guy. I think it could work out, and again, it is a shorter-term deal, which is definitely important, but since 2018, Glendening's been one of the best face-off guys in the entire league, and behind Horvat, behind Pettersson, I think he'd be a pretty good player there. Now we're going to move on to the LA Kings next up, and my pick for them is actually going to be centerman Mikael Granlund. I do see him leaving the Nashville Predators and going to more of an up-and-coming team, and I think LA fits that mold pretty perfectly. They're in need of a second-line center, especially with getting rid of Jeff Carter this past year, and I really don't see them thrusting Gabriel Velarde into that position if he's not ready. I think, though, Mikael Granlund gives him some flexibility. In terms of the actual contract itself, I do see it being a $4.8 million deal for the next 3 seasons, but Granlund can play with some great young players and get pretty much a fresh new start on that LA team. Now we're going to move on to San Jose, and this is just a pairing that I think is just too perfect. I think San Jose will end up signing Linus Ullmark, a $5 million deal for 4 years. Was great this last year for Buffalo. They're probably going to get rid of the Martin Jones contract. That gets them even more cap space, but I think Linus Ullmark solving that goaltending position is key, and Ullmark could be the guy to hopefully save San Jose at the very least. Now moving on to the Detroit Red Wings. This is another team that I think will be more active in terms of the trades and actual free agency, but I think their next pick will actually be Michael Del Zotto. A pretty solid player throughout Columbus's whole stint this last year, signed a PTO, made the team, and was pretty great for Columbus. In terms of the actual play, he had 13 points in 53 games played, and was defensively, I thought, pretty strong for them. Definitely one of the more underrated defenders this year. Now, who knows if he translates that as well in Detroit, but I think it's a pretty solid spot for him to get some veteranness for some of those younger players and just to add a older voice into that locker room. Now we're going to move on to the next team, though, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think they'll also replace Michael Del Zotto with another more aging defensive player. I think that will be Travis Hamonic. Just a kind of controversial, inconsistent year with the Vancouver Canucks, but I do think he'll get a 2-year deal at $1.5 million. He does play on the right side. He's 30 years old, got 10 points in 38 games this last year. Still decent and still can provide some value. Now we're going to move on to the New Jersey Devils, and we're continuing on the train of defensive defensemen. I think New Jersey will be the team that Derek Forbort from the Winnipeg Jets actually lands. Now, Winnipeg would probably be able to keep him. I think it's just a matter of how much the price will be, and I think Forbort will want to get a multi-year deal, and I think in New Jersey he would get that. I'm thinking a $3 million deal for 2 years. Forbort was pretty okay for Winnipeg this past year, but might be outside their price range at that point. But New Jersey can come in, sweep him, get a little bit of a more underrated presence there, big physical play, and could add to that defense pretty strongly. Now we're going to move on to the Anaheim Ducks, though, next up, and I think they will go for a centerman. That guy will end up being Erik Haula. Now, he will make $3 million for 3 years. He is a winger and a centerman. I have my concerns with Erik Haula. This past year in Nashville was one of the worst defensive players I had seen throughout the last season, but I do think Erik Haula can still have some face-off value, still can have some overall value, and in Anaheim, they can afford for him to make some mistakes, hopefully, to add to that tank for Connor Bedard and Shane Wright these next couple of years. And then for the next team we do have next up, I have the Buffalo Sabres, who, I mean, take your pick. If they want the first overall pick next year, they'll go back to Taylor Hall, get it done. It's going to be $12 million for 1 year this next time, but for Buffalo, I honestly have no idea. I don't think free agency is going to be a huge part of their offseason, but if anybody wants to play, good luck to them. Oh, and also last up, Seattle Kraken, they'll get Roman Polak out of retirement. That'll be their signing for this free agency, which honestly, that's the best free agency move you could ever possibly make. Roman Polak for Norris every single year, baby. Anyways, that is going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you agree and disagree with my rankings and picks? Who do you see your favorite team signing in this year's free agency? Let me know your thoughts, and let me know in the comments down below all your thoughts there. Share this video with your friends. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you are new on this channel, and make sure you click on this card for all the hockey rankings content right on playlist. My name is Nathan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.